In the late 1980s, a handwritten note from the MWL in Bosnia told Osama bin Laden that the IIRO was offering its offices to support the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. Between 40 and 50% of IIRO funds were diverted to finance terrorist training in camps in Afghanistan and Kashmir. The IIRO supported the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, EIJ, that is the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, and Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, who was using terror to bring about an Islamic State in southern Philippines. That is in another chapter. The Haramain Islamic Foundation, founded in 1988, has close ties to the royal family. It also is a branch of the MWL and has its headquarters in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. It has spent large sums of money funding radicals and had a reputation for building or restoring mosques and funding Quranic schools. It was committed to funding Islamists in Afghanistan to the tune of $50 million a year, including Al-Qaeda. It also financed terrorism for the Muslim revolt in Chechnya. When the Saudis passed the law about charities in 1993, AHIF was already funding terrorists in Bosnia and Somalia. Besides, it was basically exempt from investigation because of its close ties to the royal family. AHIF funded the EIJ and had employees that were members of Al-Ittihad al-Islamiyya, AIAI, in Somalia. AHIF funds to AIAI were disguised as donations for mosques and orphanages, but they really went to support Somali Mujahideen in their travel to and from Saudi Arabia. In November 2001, the funds of AHIF were finally frozen. AHIF fought statements that listed it with organizations involved in terrorist attacks in the Washington Times. The newspaper apologized, but its office in Ashland, Oregon was still indicted in U.S. District Court. Saudi charities were still funding terrorism. The World Assembly of Muslim Youth, WAMY, has yearly conferences for Muslim youths worldwide. Osama bin Laden's nephew, Abdullah bin Laden, opened its first branch in the U.S. with the purpose of dawah, or calling people to Islam. The WAMY promotes Islamic education, and it has been used as many as 10 years before 9/11 as a channel for public and private Saudi donations to hardline Islamic organizations. U.S. authorities have suspected WAMY of funding terrorists since 1996. Many wealthy Saudis founded smaller charities and were eager to fund Afghan Arabs. The Al-Wafa Foundation, for example, was difficult to trace because of its common name and small size. It was probably a front organization for Al-Qaeda. In 2002, an investigation of its offices in Afghanistan turned up a laboratory with explosives, fuses, terrorist guidebooks, documents that linked it with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Abdul Aziz, captured and imprisoned in Guantanamo, funneled money to bin Laden through Al-Wafa. The Benevolence International Foundation, or BIF, started in 1992 as an amalgamation of the Islamic Benevolence Committee, the IBC, and the Benevolence International Corporation, or BIC, founded by bin Laden's brother-in-law, both of which supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. BIF's private agenda was a dawah organization to spread Wahhabism actively throughout the Muslim and Western worlds. Its 1999 mission statement was to make, quote, Islam supreme on this earth, unquote. In November 2001, BIF was declared a terrorist organization, and its offices in the U.S. were shut down. After the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, BIF wanted to, quote, demonstrate the power of Islam by an attack in the USA, unquote. It moved its headquarters to Plantation, Florida. It received funds from wealthy American Muslims. Its director, Inam Arnaout, had strong ties with bin Laden, the MAK, and the MWL. A search of his home and office showed that BIF was a front to launder money to bin Laden to purchase rockets, mortars, dynamite, rifles, and bombs for members of Al-Qaeda. BIF had its offices in Bosnia, Chechnya, where it employed Saif al-Islam al-Masri and Al-Qaeda terrorists, Pakistan, China, Ingushetia, and Russia. In 1999, a memorial for a BIF employee killed in Tajikistan wrote that, quote, he was the 9th officer to die in the line of duty since 1992, unquote. Collins and Burr, the authors of Alms for Jihad, point out that this is an oddly high mortality rate for a charity. Throughout the 1990s, Israel pressed the U.S. to crack down on U.S.-based Islamic organizations providing aid to Hamas and Hezbollah. The Clinton administration did not want to investigate any Islamic charities to avoid charges of bigotry, ethnic discrimination, or constitutional questions. On May 12, 2003, suicide bombers blew up a residential compound in Riyadh. Saudi Arabia rounded up hundreds of mujahideen. 2,000 radical clerics were expelled from mosques. Jihad rhetoric would not be tolerated. Banks would now have to identify fund recipients. Saudi charities, though, remained mostly immune. The U.S. would have to be satisfied with the occasional dismissal of the head of this or that charity. Although Saudi Arabia joined the Financial Action Task Force, led by the U.S., and then froze $5.8 million of questionable funds, 150 other countries had already frozen $112 million in funds since 9/11. The Saudis closed down the AHIF offices in Somalia, Bosnia, Kenya, Tanzania, Pakistan, and Indonesia, and promised to prohibit mosques from accepting cash. Saudi Arabia's efforts, however, were insufficient and needed reform. Both 9/11 and 5/12, ironically, stimulated an increase in Islamic charitable activities.